Last week, one of the things that we learned was that if you take the word for what we call so-called exile, goyla, so that's the word goyla, and you take the word for the time of Mashiach, geula. So we said that the only difference between the two words is that geula has an aleph. And that teaches us that in spite of the fears that people have, who knows what's going to happen when Mashiach comes, maybe I'm going to lose everything that I built in my life, and it's going to be a really difficult transition. Don't worry. Goyla, everything is going to be just as you know it and as you like it, but there'll be an incredible addition, an awareness, a consciousness represented by the letter Alef, which represents the oneness of Hashem. So that's the big change that is supposed to happen when Mashiach comes. So that's what we learned last week. What we're going to do this week is a bit more in-depth analysis of what this Aleph represents. The word Aleph in Hebrew, as we're going to learn, is related to three possible concepts. And each of those concepts adds another layer of exactly how much is going to change and exactly how the world is going to change from now to the experience of Mashiach. The first one we touched on already last time, but let's develop it a little bit further. So if you take the word Aleph, Aleph is related to the word aluf. So in the Torah, we use the word aluf. You'll see it a few times. Aluf is like a chieftain, the head, the person in charge of a whole group of people is called the aluf. And specifically, when we refer to Hashem, one of the ways that we refer to Hashem is we call Hashem alufoi shel oilam, which means basically the master of the universe, the one in charge of the entire creation. So now when you walk around, if you happen to walk around between 6 and 9 a.m., so if you walk around, you go outside, you look at the world, you don't see the Aleph, you don't see that Hashem is in control, you don't see that Hashem is directing the world. You go outside and what you see is that the leaves have started to change color and they started to fall off the trees. You see that actually there's less litter around because there are fewer people walking around. You notice that there's a blue sky. You notice that there's a lot of bird life. Whatever it is that you notice. So you look around, you look at the world. Basically what you see is, as they say in the classics, what you see is what you get. Everything at face value. You don't see that there is an alufoi shel oilam. You don't see that there's a Hashem directing, controlling, orchestrating everything that happens in the world. Take it to a different angle. When you read the news, I don't know if anybody reads news anymore. When you watch the news and people tell you, and it's such a confusing time right now because this one tells you that the numbers are declining and that one tells you that the numbers are rising and that one tells you that half the countries are not telling the real story. And this one tells you that we've had, they say in the United States, more job losses in 4 weeks than they had in any time since the Great Depression. So you hear all the news or whatever the case, you start to feel, oh my gosh, maybe the world has spiraled out of control and people are defying the lockdown laws. And so because of that, we're going to have all kinds of second waves of illness. And you kind of think almost as if the world has taken on a life of its own. And there are some leaders who are responding in a healthy way and other leaders who are responding in a terrible way. And we're all in their clutches. We're pawns in all of this. We don't even have power. We can't even submit an insight to the leadership about how they should be dealing with this thing. So we're completely in their hands. And if they decide tomorrow that they're backtracking on some other rule, like they did with the cigarettes, then we're going to be stuck. So alufoi shel olam, we lose sight of the fact that Hashem is orchestrating everything, top to bottom. So for example, just to contextualize it, who chose that this particular epidemic should occur at this particular time in history? Hashem. There's no question about it that there have been epidemics before, and there's no question about it that the Chinese were either complicit or at the very least negligent. There's no question that these things all happen. But who orchestrates all of that? Alufoi shel olam. Hashem orchestrates all of that. And who orchestrated that the leadership of the South African government right now should not be Jacob Zuma? You're supposed to say a special bracha for that every single day. So who orchestrated that? Hashem orchestrated that this should happen at this particular time. And that you and I should be in the particular circumstances that we are in right now. That Some people tell you it's the worst time ever to have to go into a lockdown. Other people tell you it's unbelievable. If Hashem was ever going to do this, or if this was ever going to happen in the world, I'm in the best possible position. I've got high-speed internet, and I've got family, whatever it is. Everybody's got their individual story. So alufoi shel olam. We have to convince ourselves of this information. We have to convince ourselves, because there are many people out there who don't think this way, and there might even be times that we don't think this way. So the big difference between living now and living in the time of Mashiach is that now the concept that Hashem runs the world is something I have to work to understand and to believe. And when Mashiach comes, I'll see it. I'll see it absolutely clearly and in a way that nobody can deny it, which incidentally is why the world will be a better place, because obviously if people recognize that Hashem is in control, they'll behave differently and they'll treat each other differently, and they'll aspire for different things. So that's the big shift that's supposed to happen. Alufoi shel olam, that you'll actually see that Hashem is in control. The language that we use for this in Hasidus, as we call it, you'll see koyach hapoel benifal, which means you'll actually see the energy that drives the system. Right now, what we only see is the system. So let's say, for argument's sake, that, and it's not a good example because it's not something we would care about, but just to illustrate the point. So let's say, for argument's sake, you have a cell phone. Everybody has a cell phone. We're using phones right now in order to be able to communicate. So you look at your cell phone and you see the nif'al, you see the system. You push this button, connects you to these people, and then you can have a conversation. What you don't see is the koyach hapoyal benifal. You don't actually see how the system works. You don't see what's running the system. You don't see the waves of the 4G network that are, or some people tell you the 5G network, which is the cause of the disease, if you want to go down that conspiracy theory wormhole. So whatever, you don't see the radio waves that are carrying the cell phone signal. You don't see the circuitry inside your cell phone. You don't see it, and you don't have to see it. It's fine. I don't have to know how all of these things work. As long as when I push that button, it works. So I don't see the koyach hapoyal benifal, and there's really no value actually to see it. It's not going to enhance my experience. But when we talk about Hashem, it would totally enhance and totally change my experience to see koyach hapoyal benifal, to see Hashem's energy flowing through every single thing in this world, rather than just to see the things as they are. It's a complete revelation. Suddenly I realized that trees and leaves are not just trees and leaves. It's a specific manifestation of godliness that's actually quite awe-inspiring to see. Now, one of the things that we know as a general rule in Judaism is that whatever you want to achieve, you have to plan for accordingly. So the most obvious example is Shabbos. Misha torach be'erev Shabbos, yochal b'Shabbos. It says, whoever puts in work before Shabbos will be able to eat on Shabbos. You can't cook on Shabbos. So it's a logical principle that if you don't cook before Shabbos, you'll have nothing to eat on Shabbos. Likewise, we have a principle that everybody's familiar with, which is called midah keneged midah, that Hashem always responds to us in the same way as we behave. So that basically means whatever energy we put out, that's the kind of energy that will come back our way. And based on that principle, what we say is that whatever bracha we want or whatever revelation we want to get from Hashem, the way to get it is we have to behave in kind. So if what we want is to have this Alef introduced into our world, that's what we want, because we say we want Mashiach. That's the goal and the purpose. This is what the whole of Judaism is about, is to arrive at this point that Mashiach comes and Hashem is revealed. In the language of the prophet Yeshaya, the nigle kvoid Hashem, the glory of Hashem will be revealed. V'ra'u kol basar yachtav, you'll be able to see it with your physical eyes. That's what we want. And we've just discussed what that is. It's this Alef, this consciousness, this awareness that you don't have to read about Hashem in a book. You can actually see it with your own eyes. You can see Hashem's energy pulsating. You can see Hashem's hand directing everything. You know how much less stressed we would be if we could see Hashem's hand? If you knew that what was happening in your life right now was directed personally for your benefit by Hashem, you'd never be stressed for a minute. You'd live the most incredibly tranquil, calm, fulfilled kind of life. So if that's what we want to have, if we want that Alef to enter into our experience, then we've got to train for it, which means that we have to learn how to discover the Alef in our own experience. Because a lot of the time what happens is we discover it in the books. And when we are reading about it, we say, oh yes, of course Hashem is in control. And when we're feeling inspired, we say, yes, of course Hashem is in control. And when we see something happen that is to our benefit, we say, yes, Hashem blessed me. But the other times when we're not feeling so inspired and when we're not in a so to speak, Torah-based environment, or God forbid, when things don't go well, then we say, where's Hashem? What's Hashem? I haven't thought about Hashem. I have other interests. So we have to introduce the Alef into our own lives. And the way that we do that is through a process that is called Kol Ma'asecha L'Shem Shamayim. That's one expression. And the other expression, which is a variation on the theme in a higher grade version, is B'chol Derachecha Da'ehu. So the first expression is Kol Ma'asecha, every action that you take, everything that you do, L'Shem Shamayim, should be dedicated to Hashem. The second, which is a more kind of advanced level, is B'chol Derachecha Da'ehu, that you should know Hashem in all of your ways. Okay, so it sounds a little bit abstract. What does it actually mean? So it means like this. When a person engages in any ordinary, mundane, day-by-day activity, you have two choices of how to do it. The one choice, which is the default choice, which most people do, unfortunately, because we're not really trained to do otherwise, is when we engage in a mundane activity, it's all about the mundane activity. So if I sit down to breakfast, the goal is breakfast. And part of the goal of breakfast is that I'll eat food that is nutritious, and I'll eat food that I enjoy. And that's pretty much as far as it goes. There's no da'ehu, there's no knowing Hashem in that experience by default. Or if I decide to use the 6 to 9 window and I go outside to exercise and I go for a run or a walk or a ride. So the goal is to be able to get fresh air, to be able to be in a healthier state, emotionally, mentally, by getting out of my confine. It's to allow me to become a healthier person. So all of those things, that becomes what defines that particular activity. There's no sense of da'ehu, there's no sense of knowing Hashem by taking an exercise walk, right? And so on and so forth. The same applies to business and to socialization and to entertainment and so on and so forth. So there's no Alef in my goyla, in my personal experience of life. I don't see the Alef, I don't see the godliness. So it's insufficient just to wish, please God, one day it will happen. You know, like people always say, please God by you, you know. Please God, one day it will happen. Please God, one day there'll be this revelation of godliness in the world, and that will be a wonderful world to live in. That's not the purpose. Hashem didn't create a world for us to just coast along, and then one day He's going to throw this big surprise at us and say, okay, game over, now it's time for something different. The purpose of creation was for us to become His partners. That's why in the beginning, when it finishes off the first week of creation, it says that Hashem created everything. Asher bara Elokim la asois. Hashem created everything for us to do, for us to be His partners. So in order to have this Alef experience, basically to bring Moshiach, we are empowered, and that means that we also have a responsibility. Yeah. We want Moshiach now. We're getting the we want Moshiach now somebody. We want Mashiach now. You're right. That's exactly what we're talking about. So we are empowered, and therefore we have the responsibility to actually activate that Alef, to actually bring that godliness into our lives. And that starts with ordinary activities. Why do I eat? Because now that gives me an opportunity to have energy to do another mitzvah. Why do I exercise? Because if I'm in a good headspace, I can probably concentrate better when I learn, or I can be more patient with other people, or other things that Hashem would want. The Alef comes into my daily experience. That's actually not just how I prepare the world for Mashiach, but I actually start to live with Mashiach. That's level 1 of the Alef. And please God, tomorrow we'll explore level 2.